Guys, please take your seats. We will start. Thank you for coming. Good to see you. And today's meetup is all about product development and the way we consume our web these days. Today we have two talks by one speaker. So please welcome Nitzan.
Hey guys, thank you. So we're going to have two sessions today, and the first one is going to be about how we think about developing product when we have so much data. So I'm going to share with you some of the thoughts around that. And the second one is going to have to be a deep dive into ADI, which is a product that we launched a year ago, and it's a super exciting one. So first, before I actually start to talk about product development, we're going to do a short survey. I'm going to show you two different experiences, and I want a show of hands to which one you believe is going to be a better experience for users. I'll just give you some context. So we're going to, it's talking about Wix ADI, which is basically a new way to build a website. It actually has three parts to it. The first part is where we ask the user different questions. The second one is where ADI builds automatically the site for the user. And the third one is the actual builder, where they can edit and customize everything. So I'm going to show you two different experiences regarding the second part, where the ADI actually creates automatically a site for a user. So this is the first experience. So the user is clicking on a button, and ADI is adding all the relevant sections to their site. As you can see, you see a progress bar. It takes about 10 seconds. And at the end, they have a website that they can use. So that's experience number one, okay? Experience number two, it's this one. I actually did it about 3x faster. So it's about 30 seconds versus 10 seconds. But it shows how a user actually selects each section and put it on stage versus what you saw before. Okay. So, a raise of hands. Who thinks that A is better? Well, you have to vote to one of them. So who thinks A is better? Okay. Who thinks that B is better? Okay, that's a good one. So a better one in terms of conversion. So at the end of this experience, the user stays, right? Okay, so you can raise your hand. So who thinks A? Okay. Who thinks B? Okay, it's close. It's 50-50. Okay, and the answer is, I'll let you know in a few slides. So remember what you voted for. So a minute about me. I've been working in consumer web in the past 20 years. I started in the user intelligence as a programmer, and then did a couple of startups. Also got my computer science degree. Then I went to IBM and later on to M Systems, which was acquired by SanDisk, and developed more marketing strategies for them. Then I moved to Boston. I got my MBA at the Harvard Business School, and then I moved to the Valley to Yahoo Search, and I joined the research team and managed the next generation experiences, which I'll tell you more about in a slide. Then I moved back to Boston and joined SonicBids, which is a music consumer web company where I manage the dev, product, and design teams. Basically, SonicBids is a place that is doing matchmaking between musicians and those that are looking for talent. Next, I moved back to Israel and founded Safety Nest, which was all about saving people from losing money in the stock market. So it was after 2008. Many people lost a lot of money, and the idea here was that you can invest and you can say what's in the worst case you're willing to lose, let's say 10%. You click a button and we are automatically investing the money for you. And we're doing it in such a way where we're hedging with options, so it's impossible for you to lose more than what you invested. Um, After a year, I decided to close shop, although I still believe in the idea. And I joined Wix about 5 years ago. And in Wix, I basically started a new group responsible for more consumer-facing products. So Wix ADI is one of them. Wix CRM is another one. Wix My Account, which is basically a place where you manage and grow your business, and Wix Infrastructure. So 4 different teams, and that's it. So regarding Yahoo search, so although in the last 20 years I've been doing a lot of things regarding consumer web, I would say that the first really formal education that I got when it came to product, because 20 years ago when I was a developer, we also were products because like product didn't really exist 20 years ago in the web. So whatever I did as a developer, I also did a product. But the real education that I got was at Yahoo Search. And if you think about search, it's a tricky product because on one hand, it's very complex, right? So you need basically the search engine needs to crawl the web, and they need in real time under zero point 0.2 seconds to show you all the relevant results, rank them, take freshness into account. So if something happened, they need to take that into account, and all that in super fast. So it's really complex. On the other hand, it's super easy because it's only one page. So if you think about Wix or any other product that you're doing, there are flows, there are different use cases. Here at the end of the day, it's one page. But the page when I was there was worth $3 billion, and we had 150 million users per month. So everything was A/B tested, and you can imagine that every pixel here is worth millions of dollars. So that was pretty cool. And what I was doing there basically was managing intent-driven experiences where we understood the intent of a query, for instance, shopping intent, music intent, entertainment intent, local intent, and then took more real estate on the page. So we identify, traffic, maybe 50%, 50% of the traffic, we identify the intent. So that was the responsibility of my team. Moving gears towards Wix, also we have a lot of traffic. We have, more than 110 million users, and also our collections this year are going to be close to $500 million. So we're also doing a lot of A/B tests. So I calculated somehow that over the past 10 years, I probably did more than 1,000 A/B tests. So I hope that I'll be able to share some of the things that I learned. So before we get to BI and A/B tests, just to zoom out a bit, one of the key things for a product person is really to get insights from users and surface them and tell them to everybody, so we'll figure out together what to do. And there are different ways of how to gather data. You can interview people, you can do different observations like usability, studies where you see how a user is actually interacting with your product, surveys, and use data, right, which is BI-based. Well, the first two are really qualitative, which is cool. So you're taking a handful of people and you go through, interviews or usability tests, and you can learn from that. You mainly can learn if something is really wrong, but it's really hard to base decisions based on qualitative. Sorry. So if we're going to quantitative, you have servers and usage data, but then you have another problem, which is the first three can be really biased. So what I mean biased, it means that unless you really are a professional and know exactly how to ask the questions and how to select the people, and there are so many parameters that are taken into account, most likely you will have some bias. And then how can you rely on the results? So that's why we're going to focus on usage data today, which is BI-based. So the first step when you actually need to think about this world of BI-driven product is really to define the KPI, which is key performance indicator. I mentioned something here that actually step 0 is understanding the product and the business. So unless you understand the product and the business, then it's going to be really hard for you to understand the KPI. So KPI, again, key performance indicator, and it means how do you measure that you're successful? So, and almost everything in life has KPI. So for instance, KPI that you can think about me presenting to you is a cool KPI could be how many of you are here right now and how many of you are going to stay towards the end of the presentation, right? So if it's close to the first number, it's a good KPI for me, right? So that's an example for KPI. But if we'll go more towards the web, then these are like classic KPIs, right? You want to increase the traffic, conversion, engagement, signups. You want to reduce something that users are doing. And of course, this is just a short list. Back to this experience. So you actually asked, like, how do we define the success here? So the first KPI is really what's the percentage of users that actually stayed till the end to finish the auto builder, right? That's the first one. But I would argue that you have other KPIs. For instance, okay, let's say that they stayed, but what they actually did after that. Let's call that deeper actions. So we want to make sure that then they edited the site, they changed the design, they published the site, probably want to measure premium. So all these are KPIs that, as a product, I'm going to define, of course, before I'm testing it. The second thing that I found helpful is really to go to Excel, Google Docs, whatever, and actually write what you think was going to happen. So for instance, I thought that this is going to happen. Between A and B, I wrote all the KPIs on the left side. On one hand, it's fun, because then you can bet with yourself what will happen. But the more important thing is actually making sure that you're defining all the KPIs. Because after you define this, the business analyst needs to create a report, and the developer needs to define the BI in the code. So unless you really know what you measure and you're doing something like this, you can also do graphs, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, you need to think about, ideally, how the test is going to play out, what am I going to get out of the test, how I'm going to measure it. So for me, I found it helpful to actually do it, a mock report in Excel. So let's say that we launch a new product. Now what we need to do is basically to have some kind of a report, right? So we're going to have a report, for instance. Okay, before I actually go that. So I'm going to talk more and more about A/B tests. I want to see how many of you actually know about A/B tests. So maybe a raise of hands, how many actually ran A/B tests by themselves? Okay, so I think it's worth to take a minute to talk about A/B tests. So the idea of A/B tests, before I move forward, is really to run simultaneous experiments. And what we want to measure, we want to make sure that the difference is real. And how we define that the difference in performance is real is that it's statistically significant better. So let's say that I'm telling you that you have A and B, and A converts in 1% and B converts in 3%. So unless I know that it's statistically significant, it means nothing. Okay? Even though it's 3x the conversion, right? It means nothing. So that's why it's really important to understand that. And to calculate it, basically, so as I mentioned, we want to make sure that it's a signal, not a noise. And what we need is basically 4 numbers. We want the sample size, right, and the conversion of whatever KPI that you want. You just plug it in, and then just a math calculation. In this case, although you can see that the difference here is only 0.5%, right? It's still 98% confidence. Confidence means, in this case, 98%, is that there is still 2% chance that it's wrong. Okay? So we're not living in a perfect life, a perfect world. But what you want to shoot for is that your confidence is going to be more than 95%. And again, you can change it based on whatever you want. My recommendation is that it will be about 95%. So back to what we talked about before. So remember that I told you that ADI has the intro, where they ask the questions, and then the auto builder that you saw, and then save publish things that are going on in the builder. So when we launched ADI, we saw something like this. So we're losing some people in the intro, that's fine. And then we saw a drop in the auto builder, which is very strange. So it doesn't matter if you saw A or B, which I'll tell you more about in a second. How come we actually losing people? So we had to think about what to do there. So this is an example of how you launch a product and then you're looking at reports, you see something that either doesn't make sense or something that is like a big drop that you didn't expect, and you want to deep dive, understand it, and do an A/B test to fix it, right? So in this case, we did this A/B test. As you can see, actually this was our A, this was our B. So although I showed it differently, this was the reality. I tried to trick you. So this was the baseline, and I'll actually tell you the rationale behind doing this as a baseline. We wanted to make sure that people understand how to use the tool ADI. So instead of us just building something behind the scenes, we wanted to imitate a human, selecting each one of the sections and adding them to the page. So that was the rationale. Now, it took about 30 seconds. So that was a bit long, but we said, okay, it's 30 seconds, but in 30 seconds you have a site. Like, who is not going to stay for that? Well, it turns out that some people didn't. And when we did something like that, which took 10 seconds, although they didn't see the experience at all, it actually improved the conversion. So these are the results, 15% increase in completion. But something that I was worried when we did it. I said, okay, I think it's okay to think that that's going to improve, but what's going to happen inside the builder? Because will users actually understand how to use the product when we don't show that to them? And the answer is yes. So you can see increase in save, publish, and also premium increased. So although we had the theory, I was actually totally wrong. So the last step is. So the last step, if you want to really make a huge change, is to do something completely different. What do I mean by that? Is like everything that I just mentioned is, looking at a report and thinking about how to improve something, A/B test it. It's called iterations, right? You do more and more iterations. And when you do more and more iterations, if you're currently here, you're going to get to somewhere here, which is like a local maximum, which is great. But if you really want to make a difference, you need to think in a different way. And that's the only hope that you'll have for moving from here to somewhere here. And then you can iterate again. So my point here is that once you get to a plateau, once you get to somewhere where you don't think that it's worth to continue to do those small iterations, think about the next thing. So I'll give you two examples. One is it's a product called My Account, or the dashboard of our users. About 4.5 years ago, it looked like this, where users went to Wix, they logged in, and they saw a big edit button, they clicked on it and went to their site. It was really a place where you build your site. And My Account today looks like this, which are a bunch of applications all about helping you manage and grow your business. We have CRM inside, we have different tools to help you promote your business. So in order to move from here to here, it wouldn't help me, move things around here, add a bit more functionality. We need to do something extreme. And same for ADI, right? So that's our builder. It's a great builder. That's Wix editor. And we could continue to improve it, but it would never be something like this. So we had to take a bet to say it's worth for us to take that bet and do something extreme. So if I summarize, the first part is understanding the business and defining the KPI. Then you build a mock report, and it helps define your BI events for the developer. You launch the experience, you measure it, and that becomes your baseline. And you continue to improve and iterate through A/B tests, through different reports, until you win, right? So once B wins, then B becomes the new baseline. And then you figure out something else, and you're doing another A/B test. So that's a back and forth. And then at certain point, you make that big bet. Okay, so towards the end of the presentation, I want to talk to give you a few tips that I learned over time that might help you. The first tip is something that luckily at Yahoo and Wix, we didn't have that problem, but I know that problem happens in smaller startups. Like what happens when you don't have enough traffic? what I mean by that is, let's say that you don't have enough traffic and you're doing all the measurements that I mentioned. It could be that you need to run your A/B test for 3 years, right? Like you just don't have enough data. So there are two things that you can do. They're not bulletproof, but I found them very helpful. The first one is leading indicators, so to use leading indicators for your KPI versus the actual KPI. And the second one is to look at the trend over time, and I'll explain both of them. So this is an example for the Wix funnel. It starts with anonymous users, which are visitors, and then free, which means our users are registering, opening the editor, saving in the editor, publishing, package picker where they choose the different packages, and purchasing. So that's the flow. And when we say we basically think about conversion and looking at premiums, we always look at this. Now, what would happen if I don't have enough traffic? Then I need to backtrack and understand if I have a leading indicator. For instance, I can share with you that if a user has many number of saves, like they're saving a lot, it's a pretty good indicator towards that they'll do a purchase. Now again, it's not perfect, but it's a leading indicator, which means that let's say that I don't have enough traffic. Instead of looking at this as my KPI, I can look at number of saves. So that's one example. The other example is to look at trend over time. So basically what I did here is so let's say that I'm interested in premiums, so conversion. So every day I'm looking at the conversion of B minus the conversion of A and plot it on the graph, okay? And then over time, if it's real and it's not noise, hopefully you'll see something like this. Now the confidence here is still lower than 95%. I'll need to, maybe another month or 2 months, depends, to actually get to a confidence. But if you see this kind of trend, again, it's an indicator that you're winning. So these are two suggestions, and none of them is bulletproof, but it can help you. Another realization is that most of the A/B tests that you're doing are not going to impact the dollar, like the sales. Definitely not in the short term. And it's something that you need to realize, because as a product person, you really want to launch only things that move the needle. And sometimes, most of the cases, they don't move the needle. I would argue that you still want to do it because over time it will improve. It's just very hard to see it at that point. So unless you're doing an A/B test that takes together many, many features, like a new product, and launch it together, which in most cases you're not doing it, because what you want in an A/B test is actually to change just one parameter and then A/B test it. Because if you're changing a few parameters and you A/B test, then you don't know what caused it. It could be that one of your changes made it increase, another one decrease, and then you don't know what's happening. But unless you're doing something like this, or you're touching the top of the funnel. So the top of the funnel is the registration, the home page, something really at the top, or actually the package picker or the payment page at the bottom. So unless you're doing something pretty extreme like that, most likely you're not going to actually see the difference. But it's still worth doing it, first as a sanity test to make sure that nothing breaks. And also, as I mentioned, I believe that if you believe in the feature and it's a good experience for your users, even though you don't see it at the bottom line, you should launch it. The last comment here is that beside conversion, another KPI that we usually look at is churn, which is basically how many users left me. And it's something that is really hard to do in an A/B test. It usually takes a month to actually see it. So that's something that, unfortunately, in most cases, unless it's really extreme, so unless it's really bad, you're not going to see it, and then you need to look at reports over time. Third tip is add common sense. So it happened like so many times that you see a result that like it doesn't make sense at all. So you can do a few things there. First is just the realization that when you're talking about 95% confidence, again, 5 out of 100 is going to be wrong. At any given time at Wix, we have 100 tests in the air. So probably 5 of them at any given time is not showing me the real result. So what I can do there is, if something doesn't make sense, give it more time. Another thing that you can do is look at the leading indicators and the trend over time that I mentioned before. So that can actually help you. The next tip is getting a clean sample. So clean sample means, let's say that I may have an experience. Um, it's not a good thing to launch it to all users. Probably you want to launch it only to new users because you want to see first how new users affected. And once you know how new users affected, you can expand it to all. Another example is, let's say that you have a flow and only 5% of the user actually exposed to your new experience. It doesn't make sense to look at A versus B as a whole. You probably want to filter those results to look only at the 5% in A and 5% in B that actually seeing it. If not, it's going to really dilute the signal. And we are all about making sure that the signal is real and not noise. Another cool thing that we can do today is actually understand demand for a product. So let's say that you're a product manager, you want to launch a product, but it's going to take you, let's say, 2 months to develop. Now, how do you know if you do it or not? So we're adding in some cases to our products, a ghost links. I'll show you what's a ghost link. In this case, it's our restaurant application, which also has millions of restaurants, and they have menu. So that was the first app that was launched for restaurants. And then our restaurants folks did this. They said, do you want takeout or delivery? Do you want that functionality? And many users said, yes, I'm interested. And then we said, awesome. I'm so happy that you need it, that you want it. We're going to get back to you once we have it. So we didn't develop the product, right? But that showed us demand. So let's say that we have 1 million restaurants, and then you know that 70% needs them. That's really cool. Another cool thing is we know exactly who said that they want it. So the moment we have the product, we can launch an email and tell them, hey, we have the product, come and buy it. This is something that some people don't think about because A/B test is all about improving experience, but it's really good also for debugging. This is just an example of like an A/B test that we launched, and we saw in B we're counting certain type of errors, and we saw that we have errors. These are days, and then we figured out that we have a problem. We fixed the problem, and then it became 0. So it's an example where we can use also BI to understand where we have issues between A and B. This is another example where we're basically testing loading time between A and B, and you can see here we did something that impacts performance. We didn't expect that, but it's a good thing that we measure it, and we fixed it before we launched. The last point is that in the beginning we talked about other ways that you can do, you can gather data. If it's interviews and surveys, and it's actually BI can also help you do that. So for instance, let's say that you want to talk, interview, whatever, people that used feature X but didn't use feature Y, right? Or you want to really understand the rationale behind this kind of data. So you can actually do a report, get all their emails, and then shoot them an email, hey, I would love to talk to you, or send them a survey that can give you like focused feedback about an area. And last, a cool site if you like A/B tests. It's actually changed its name, now it's called behave.org. And every week they have kind of an experience that a different company in the world did. So you can register and you get an email and you can see if you're getting it right or not, like we did in the beginning. That's it. Questions? Mm. You're talking about this one? It's real. The numbers on the left are not real, but it's a real drop, yeah. No, so I'm saying that the numbers on the left are not real, but it's a real drop. Like it's a yeah, it's a public company. We can't share all the data, but it's a real drop. That's why we did the A/B test, right? So this part is real, right? But here it's not. The X is on the X. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Petri. Yeah. Mhm. So I know. So I have to admit that at Yahoo we also created our own Petri, and this is the second company that we have developed our own. I know that for small companies, I think there is like Optimizely and there are a few others. I have to admit that I'm not an expert because like I didn't run an A/B test for a super small company for a while now. But I would start with Optimizely and go from there. Uh, Probably Mixpanel. uh, So in the tools that I mentioned, everybody can run it. Yeah, yeah. They are like SaaS company, very similar to Wix. Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't put the math equation here. I can share with you if you want afterwards. But it's basically a math equation where you put like four parameters, and the output is going to say the confidence level. So I didn't share it here. It's a statistical equation. I can afterwards I can write it here. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. A really good result. Wow. Um, so I didn't like realize how important is text. We call it copy text in the product. So for instance, when we launched ADI, most of the buttons in ADI were icons. So you had an edit icon and change design icon. Everything with icons. It was beautiful. Our UX people said that it's magnificent. And UI-wise, it was the best thing, but functionality-wise, it wasn't. So one of the early A/B tests that we did is actually changing the icons to text. Our UX thought that it's not as beautiful. I agree with them, but the product was working much better. So like significantly more people actually edit and change the design. So that's something at least for me to learn to always use text. And if I really want an icon, it's going to be an icon and text, not only icon. I will always go towards more functional versus beautiful. And so, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question. We also did like different tests for copy. So that's again like, we have, for instance, change design versus change layout. So again, you think, how much is that going to like? It's a word. So yeah, each like small tweak is making such a big change. So copy, like text, is really important in your product. Yeah. Sorry. I'm not sure I understood. Is it like what kind of features will change conversion? Yeah. So that's this part that I mentioned before. So most likely, if you want to affect premiums, it's really to touch the top of the funnel or the bottom of the funnel. So either the home page, the sign up, something that has most of your visitors, because after those pages you're losing usually like 50, 60, 70%. Depends on what's the product. So if you're making that change and you convince them to do that extra click, you have highly chance that they will continue in the flow, and then that will percolate to purchase. The, yeah. Package picker, you mean? When you say package, you mean package in the package picker, like packages? Yeah, that's probably one of the most A/B tested pages at Wix because it's worth so much money, right? So probably every week we have at least one test, if not more. Yeah. So you're talking about like user segmentation? Yeah. So Yeah. So it's actually tricky because if I ask you who is a user of Google or Facebook, it's like pretty much everyone, right? So Wix is at a state where we have more than 110 million users. So it's actually everyone, right? At the moment, like we have students, we have DJs, we have like every like type of person that you can think of is building. So it's really hard for me to say, that segment because it's across all segments, and it really depends on their intent that they have. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So, of course, that's right. It's a big A/B test, right? So you remember, yeah. So you remember this part? Whoop. Yep. So as I mentioned, we can continue to A/B test, and then we'll get to local maximum. But if we want to get there, we need to do something like ADI. But we can still A/B test it. So we A/B tested editor in A versus editor and ADI in B. And what we're interested to see is ADI and editor together increase the pie, they increase the number of premiums over just the editor. So that's actually the first A/B test that we did about a year ago when we launched, and we saw that it increased. This means that ADI was able to convert users that the editor wouldn't have been able to convert, right? Maybe because it's too complex, or maybe it's because it takes too much time. So, um, I can't, public company, sorry, but it was significant. Yeah, it was worth developing it. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So when we're doing A/B test, we always think whether they will impact each other, right? So for instance, if I'm doing an A/B test in the sign up and then I'm doing an A/B test in ADI, it's not a problem because they're pretty much orthogonal, right? Right? A and B will split, and then there will be C and D, right? If you can imagine it in your head. Then you take everything C versus everything D, so you're not going to affect. So what I think you're asking is what happens if in the same page you're changing more than one thing. So my suggestion is not to do it. So do one test, win, do the other test. Don't do it together. Unless, again, you really believe that they're not going to impact each other. Cool. So we'll take a short break. Cool. Thank you. Cool. So we're going to move to the second presentation, where we're going to talk only about Wix ADI. So Wix ADI was launched about a year ago. It took us 2 years to actually make it happen, which is a long time when it comes to consumer web. And I want to start with actually talking about why we did it. So ADA stands for Artificial Design Intelligence. And why did we actually decide to do it? And why we decided to make that leap, right? So we're talking to users all the time. And the main issues that our users kept saying again and again are the following. You need to think that our users are usually small businesses, right? So put your small business hat on and think about the users. They're not really writers. They don't know what kind of content they need to put in their website, how to structure it, how to write the actual text. So the first question that they always say, like, what kind of content do I need? Sometimes I'm talking to users and they're saying, look, it's too complex for me to actually do it. I said, you know what, just give me the content. That's pretty much the last time that I'm hearing from them. So it's really hard to figure out what to put on your website. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that they're not designers and they really want to make sure that their site is beautiful. If you think about it, a stunning website is something not only that you're proud of, it's actually something that talks about your brand. And if you don't look good on the web, then most likely when your users are coming to your site, they're going to look at something that looks unprofessional. Most likely they're not going to buy, not your products, not your services. So being really, stunning, to be really a beautiful web design is something that is really important for our users, but they don't know how to do it. And if they start with a template, like with the editor, many times they actually ruin it because they do drag and drop and in 5 minutes you can ruin it. So that's the second problem. The third problem is that many users are not techie. So to work with our Wix editor, you need to know how to use PowerPoint. So probably for everybody that is sitting here, that's not a problem. But still, the vast majority of users don't know how to use PowerPoint in a good enough manner. So the third problem is techie. The last one is, how much time do I need to actually invest in it? Not only in creation, but also in updating, maintaining it. Again, I'm a business owner. I'm focused on making sure that I am making money, right? That's my focus. I don't have time and knowledge to learn how to write, how to be a marketer, how to be a designer. I don't have a lot of time. So these are the 4 problems. And as I mentioned to you before, and to those that were in the previous session, to actually figure out how to do all these with the current product is really hard. So we had to take a leap of faith and see how we solve each one of them in a very different way. So the first thing that I mentioned is that actually it was the 4th one, but I want to start with this one, is like we don't have enough time, right? So what do you think about reducing site building from days and weeks to hours, right? So that's what we did. And instead of actually reading all that, I'm going to tell you that. And what we're going to see is a movie, which is 2.5 minutes, where we're building a website for a real business. So this is the actual flow. Sorry. Okay. So this is like real flow. I want to build this website for a yoga teacher, so I'm selecting that. Here it asks me if I need certain apps. I said no. I put the name of the business. I put the location of the business. ADI now asks me if it can go and gather data about my business. I said yes. It found my business online. So now it knows my industry. It knows all my content from around the web. You take all that into account, everything that it learned before about that type of business. Here we ask the user for an initial look and feel for the site. We identified the logo, so we're extracting the logo automatically and the colors of the logo. And now we're asking ADI to create a homepage, and you already saw that before, right? So it's adding different sections. You see welcome section, about section, gallery section, my classes section. Those are unique sections for that specific business. It's not the same for each one, for everyone. It's really tailored for that. And this is a website that I got in a minute and a half, right? And now, again, we don't need to do everything here, but you can click on a design, change the layout, right? Notice that it's keeping the content, and I can just change the layout with a click. I can edit the content. So pretty much, if I know what I'm doing, in a few minutes I have a website, and I can click publish at the end. So that was number one. The second one is I'm not a writer. So as you saw, we already created content, right? Automatically, as you saw. So what's content? And what does it mean to actually create a unique content? So let's say that this is a specific page. The first part is site structure. That's the first part of content. Site structure is, header and footer, and different sections that are relevant, again, to that specific type of business. And we're supporting thousands of different sub-businesses, from lawyers and DJs to, removing graffiti to bee farm, right? Like whatever you want, pretty much we have it. And we create that kind of unique content for each one. So site structure, that's the first one. The second one is copy. So the actual copy, in this case, the header, but it's actually also about me, services, everything is tailored content for that sub category. The next part is media, images, videos, galleries. Next one is look and feel, which also talks about design, but I still want to talk about it in the context of content, because part of content is also the look and feel of the site. And the look and feel means colors and fonts and styles and spaces, which really makes it a very, very different site. And the last one is functionality. We're making functional website. It's not only static copy and images. It's actually, in this case, e-commerce, right? And booking, where you can book appointments and blog. And we're doing all that with a click of a button. So that was number two, right? We created unique content for each subcategory. So this means that when our users when our users are getting something like this, right, they can go and just with a few clicks edit it, make it their own, change a bit the copy, unless we already got the copy from the web, and then we just inject it, right? So unless you wrote something old about yourself, and then we injected it, then you don't even need to change your about. The third one is I'm not a designer. And I would say out of everything that I'm going to talk about, the heart of ADI is really the design. And the idea is that we're enabling users to, with a click of a button, choose from so many different layouts. That's really the core. As you can see, the same kind of content, but different layouts, and I'm changing it with one click. So if I'll take a section, for example, so you can see in this section I have an image on the left side, a title, about, I have a paragraph, and I have a button. So only 4 elements, right? So simple. So actually, if you're playing with, that's something that user generated, right? So the user can change the image, change whatever they want, and they decided that they want this kind of section. So only to arrange these 4 elements, you have thousands and thousands of different permutations. And ADI knows how to take all those permutations and in real time basically calculate different layouts that are possible for you and basically rank them. And with, again, one click, you can change whatever you want, right? And everything adjusts automatically to your content. So if you wrote more content, then it needs to change, because if it's not changing, as you'll see in a second, it's not good enough. And ADI understands that it's not good enough. It keeps making sure that you're always stunning. So here's an example where I'm going to the user is writing supercalifragilistic, right? And you can see that they started with this, and in real time, ADI says, look, it's too long. I'm going to change the design to make sure that it fits your content. Now, to do that, the algorithm needs to take into account many parameters, like the length of text, and the font size, and the font style, and the font type, because ADI measures in real time by the pixel, right? So if you have a font that has a different style, then it actually can be larger or smaller. So it makes sure that we need to calculate that. We need to take padding into account. So padding is it's basically this is padding and this is padding. So we have different padding that we need to take into account in the algorithm. Kerning is basically spaces between characters. The media proportion, the media size, and more parameters like that we need to take into account and adjust automatically. Here is another example where users start with something like this and then adds more content. ADI identifies that it's ugly and changes the layout automatically. So ADI is here to make sure that you don't have an ugly site. So even though you're trying to, well, you're not trying to ruin it, but you're just adding your own content, and sometimes it's not as good, we may want to make sure that you're always stunning. Another example is those small things, right? So you upload an image, and this is how it looks like, right? So in most of the cases, this is how it looks like. But ADI understand that there is an object there, and it needs to focus on that object. So that's how it's becoming ADI. So you don't need, so in all the other tools, when you upload something like this, you need to crop and then arrange. Here you just upload it and it looks like this. It's another example of how we're taking more and more steps from a user to make sure that they don't need to think about it. Another example could be that we identified that there are a few objects in the image, so we know how to zoom out to make sure that all of them are there. Coloration. So coloration is a big thing. It sounds easy. It's pretty hard. So let's start with palettes. And when you think about palettes, usually when you have a brand, you have like one main color. Let's call it the brand color. So first of all, you can choose your brand color. In this case, the user selects the brand color, right? But you have other options. For instance, based on the category, ADI gives you the kind of color or different colors that you need, right? So for instance, a doctor usually has a very certain color for their website, right? If you noticed. They can also get it through a logo extraction that I'll show you. Either way, they have a main color, and then ADI creates different palettes that can work with that color in a harmony way. So it means that it takes different parameters into account and build those harmonized palettes. It selects between 2 to 6 colors. Usually more than 6, it just make it a mess. And it basically has more than 300 million palettes that a user can choose from. And what we know is that once you select a different color and different palettes, then we know how to basically draw your site automatically. Here is an example for how we use colors. So it's one section, not the whole page, and you see only 4 colors. Only with 4 colors we already have, and the number of elements that we already have like 256 ways to actually paint it. If we remove different ways where it's not readable or it looks the same, then ADI removes it. Whatever it doesn't deem beautiful, it removes. And then we're left with less options. But notice that even with a few colors, You can do different things. You can do just a touch of paint, for instance, to change the titles, the buttons, and then over time you can be more and more aggressive and really to wash the whole thing with color. So we give our users that option where they are able actually to choose out of all these coloration options automatically based on their palette. Another thing that we're doing is making sure that that our text is always readable. So if you choose one of the selected palettes, it's always going to be readable. But we give an advanced feature for users that they can really hone in on specific colors. And let's say that they want these specific colors, it's going to be really hard to actually read it. So ADI identifies it and suggests to fix it. And once it's fixed, it's going to look like this. It wants to make sure that it's pretty close as much as possible for the colors that you selected. Of course, it doesn't change your main color. So all these things are taken into account when we're actually doing this. Here is an example of how we're extracting colors from a logo. We start with a logo, and then we're doing media and cut clustering. It's basically a way for us to identify clusters of the main colors. It's actually a 3D. Here you see red and green. It's RGB, so it's actually 3D. You don't see it here. And out of that, we take the main colors, the strong colors. Out of that, we rank them and make sure that we selected the right ones. We make sure that we have enough light and dark colors. If two colors look the same and we know that they're not going to look beautiful, then we cancel it and we choose something that will work better. And then we use that to actually to color your website. So that was number 3, right? Personal designer. So number 4 is what happens when I'm not techie. And here is basically we have UX, which is very simple, but it's doing complex things behind the scenes. So you already saw this one, right? How we change the layout with a click. So it looks super easy, right? But think what happens behind the scene, right? So we're always keeping the content and give you more and more option, and again, with one click you change it. That's the logo extractor that I showed you before. It happens when in the intro, if we identify your logo, as we saw before, but also sometimes we didn't identify the logo or you didn't upload it, so you can always upload it here in the builder, you choose it, and once you upload the logo, we know that you probably want to use also your colors, so we suggest that. And the same thing that you saw in the introduction, we can also offer it in the builder. And again, with one click, we're doing this. Another cool thing is do it for me, or in general, that assistance that you can always open. Basically, you can build a whole site by yourself, or again, unless it's copy text that you actually need to write by yourself. But those tools you can choose between do it for me or show me how. Show me how basically show you exactly how to use the system, or do it for me. In this case, for instance, select a different palette for you automatically. So if you're not satisfied with the colors, either you can do it by yourself or ADI will do it for you. And that's an example for optimizing for readability. This is the advanced panel that I was telling you about. It's not readable. You click on the button and ADI fixes it. Another cool thing is the animations. With one click, or actually mouse over, you can choose between different animations, and it changes the animations for your whole site. So you don't need to go section by section. Everything works. And these are just a few examples out of, we have more than 4 million sites that were built in ADI over the past year. So you see an online fashion store, musician, see, music player already. Everything is integrated. Once you say that you're a musician, we are adding the right applications to your website. Console group, you see video background. PR agency. See the animations. So before I'll finish the session, I want to talk about some of the challenges that we still are facing. Um, there are many. These are just a few examples. First one is how to automatically improve a user image. So most of the user images that they upload are not good enough. So what are ways for you algorithmically to improve those images? So that's an open issue. How to automatically put the right content at the right place, bless you. So let's say that we're gathering information from different places. How can we actually understand where, in which section, to put the right kind of image, the right kind of copy? How to fully localize the product across geos and languages. So you can imagine that in Japan, for instance, they have a very different design, right? How we take that into account, how we adapt it. And the last one, how do we adapt to continuously changing design styles? So all the time we have new design styles that are coming out. How can we continue to learn and understand how to integrate more and more variety into our product and always be on par? And I want to end with the video that we showed a year ago that really summarizes ADI. It's a marketing video. Questions? Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. That's right. So these are questions that if you'll join Wix, you'll help us figure out how to solve them. That is. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So there are different algorithms. Some of them are machine learned, some are not machine learned. So for instance, to extract a logo, colors from a logo, as I mentioned, you don't need machine learning for that. So I believe in using the right kind of algorithm. If it's machine learning or parametric function, it doesn't matter for the use case. So I don't think that everything needs to be parametric, everything needs to be machine learning. You need to actually use the right tool at the right time. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's what happens today. Yeah. Can you say that again? Sorry. Mm. Yeah. 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 So we have like many different images and videos. So it's possible, but between the variety that we have to the different layouts to the content injection, like the chances are small, right? And also, we always encourage you to make it your own. So we also extract images from different sources. So if you click a button, you can immediately choose an image that you already have in social networks and so on. Yeah. Yeah, so we're of course talking to users all the time. I would say that they're definitely happier than what they used to be. There's many things that we still need to improve in the product, so that's what we're working on in the past year. So I feel that we improved significantly and we learned a lot, but we still need to continue to improve. Sorry. More than 4 million. The editor? Yeah. So about, mm, I would say like 5% move to the new editor, to the editor. But that's a good thing. So again, we don't want them to build everything in ADI. We want to make sure that if they want ADI, they're building it in ADI. If they want the editor, they're going to the editor. They can switch. Um, we encourage that. Yeah. I can tell you that when it comes to premiums, then more premiums than 5% are going to the editor. Yeah. No? So it's the same model as Wix. It's free, and once you want to have your own domain and you want to connect it. Yep. So if you think about it, what we try to do is take designers, right, and to try to see how a machine can think like a designer. So you saw something and you say, ah, that's nice. Ah, that's ugly. That's nice. Now, if I would do that, then I wouldn't get it right. So basically, think that we had designers that can say like what looks good, what doesn't look good, and then different parameters are taken into account, and then you can have that algorithm. Yeah. Mhm. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you can use internal resources, right? We have more than 100 designers at Wix, so they can give you the ranking. Over time, we can actually use other methods of learning. So for instance, we know what our users actually change, right? We know which layouts they changed, what they had, what they changed. We can take that into account. We can take into account traffic of users, right? You can know what converted better versus other things, right? Mhm. Um, sorry, can you say it again? Yeah, so when you launch a product, you don't have that, right? And then over time, you get more and more BIs that are coming all over the place, and you can use that. Yeah, yeah. It's actually two things. One is to help users that wouldn't convert in editor or wouldn't be able to build their site right in the editor, they'll be able to do it in ADI. That's one. Second was if we can make the life of users in the editor easier. So you can start with ADI, build everything in a few minutes, several hours. The 80, 90% is there, and then you move to the editor, and then you can add more advanced functionality, right? um, I don't know if it jumps, but I think Wix Code is a very good example, right? Wix Code basically enables the developers now to develop on top of Wix. So this means between ADI editor and Wix Code, any person, alive could build their own website, right, with all the functionality that they want. So you can start with ADI, move to the editor, open Wix code, develop. Sounds good? Yeah. So actually, it wasn't this way. It was the machine created many, many different permutations, and then editors basically, designers were editors and say, beautiful, ugly, beautiful, right? And you could use, right? Yeah, manually, right? And then we could use that as data, as training data, right? So automatically you knew what's working and what's not working. And it's about taking the right parameters into account, right? So if, yeah, yeah, we have we have 100 designers. That's not a problem. That's the easy part. Yeah. So actually, we had a team, a large team that wrote copy for every subcategory over months and months and months. And for an about section, we have different versions. So they didn't write one; they actually wrote different ones. So if you take that plus all the information that we have in the introduction, and we inject that automatically to the copy because they are placeholders. And if you take that we also gather some of the copy automatically from the web and inject it, then together it's less likely that you're going to have the same kind of copy on your website. Yeah. It's a bit secretive, but you can imagine different social networks. You can imagine a website of a user, right? Mm. Mm. Mhm. Yeah. So again, it depends who you are. I think if you are a designer, then you might feel that it's taking. Yeah. So first of all, the limitation, you can just click on the editor, move the editor, and do whatever you want, right? So if limitation is an issue, you can move to the editor. So that's not a problem. Still, I understand what you're saying. Like my feeling is that because you have to change the copy and making your own, the text, you have to make it your own. So you already feel that you're doing something. And the images, sometimes you want to change them, and with one click you change. So you don't need to invest so much time, but still, even those small things make a difference. It reminds me that many years ago, there was, I forgot the name, but you could, I think it was in the US, you could actually make a cake with instant powder, whatever, and all the ingredients was there. But like you saw that nobody actually wanted to do that because it took some of the fun. So the only thing that they did, they said you need to mix it with eggs, and then it's like worked like crazy, just because people wanted to break the egg. So in order to break the egg, you have buttons, right? You can change the layouts. So we are bringing those kind of eggs, right? Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much, guys.